We aren't going to find our way out of the darker side of the human experience by violence, by uprising or rebellion. But we're going to do it by rewriting the story. We are going to write ourselves out of the fear narrative and write ourselves into the love narrative, the peace narrative, the beginning of a new era. And we do that with our imagination.
Hi friends, welcome back to Call Cut with Angelique. I'm Angelique, and today we are going to call cut on man's greatest adversary, fear. So let's get right into it. Fear is actually just a story, and it's a story that we've had for millennia. Now, I spent quite a bit of time going through this, so I actually have my computer with me today so I can go through and make sure that I hit every single point, because this is a big conversation. And fear hits in a lot of different ways, but how we're going to talk about it today is directly as it applies to story. Because when we can get right down to it, and we know that fear is just a story that we are telling ourselves, it becomes a lot easier to find the solution and how to remedy the fear. And if you stick with me till the end of this podcast, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So let's get into it. There is this teaching that I love. It's a Native American parable. And it says that there's two forces inside every human being: despair, fear, anger, truth, compassion, and courage. A child once asked, which one wins? And the answer was simple: the one you feed. In some ways, this parable answers quite a bit of the human mystery, because so many of us believe that fear is out of our control, when in reality, fear is not only in our control, but it is the very thing that we continue to give life to. So how do we do that? We don't give life to it with food or sustenance. We give life to it with belief, with emotion, with imagination. Right now, human beings are living out a story that tells us we are powerless, we are at the mercy of forces that are beyond us, external forces, and that we are waiting somehow for some savior somewhere, whether it be extraterrestrial, interdimensional, divine, or human, to come and save us. And this is a story that's been playing out for millennia. The story that we are powerless to do anything about certain things, that nothing is going to change, that we can't break a system, or we can't move forward, or we're always destined to stay stuck. Now, a fear-based myth does several things very efficiently. It keeps consciousness focused outward instead of inward. It trains people to scan the horizon for enemies instead of maintaining authorship. It replaces agency with spectatorship. So you're no longer the author of any story. You are a character in a play or a film that you did not co-create. That isn't freedom mythology. That's entrapment mythology. And the minute you understand the difference is when the game changes. Now, I've written this out. Every good game runs on the same engine: a false sense of limitation, a simulated opponent, a storyline that reacts to belief, rewards and punishments tied to behavior, and I love this one, an amnesia layer that convinces the player it's just how things are. Now, a fear mythology is not necessarily meant to be true, which is why we're seeing so many falsehoods spread like wildfire with no accountability, none whatsoever. And that's because fear mythology is actually meant to be an immersive experience. Because life is meant to be experienced, fear is no different. It's just an experience. And when we understand that we get to choose whether or not we want to participate in that experience, suddenly things change. No fear myth can survive a mind that is rooted in imagination. And the reason is because your emotional captors can only control you if you believe they have the power, if you believe that they're in charge of the story. So the question becomes, how does one free themselves from a fear narrative? Now, this takes me back to the never-ending story. And I've been obsessed with this movie as a child, but even more so as an adult, having understand anthropophagy, which is what Michael Ende originally was a student of. Not fully, he had other things that he was interested in, but he was a student of anthropophagy. And if you go back to Munich in the 1930s, which is where he was from, Munich was a highly advanced spiritual community. And they understood enlightenment and spirituality on a level that some of us are just kind of understanding now. When he wrote The Never-Ending Story, he never intended it to become what it actually became, which is why the author was so irritated with the filmmakers. There's a lot of differences from the movie to the book. So if you've only seen the movie, I do recommend you read the book, especially if you're interested, because he goes a lot deeper into the mythology in the book. If you listen to the words from the theme from The Never-Ending Story, there's two lines that really got me. The one is, "Show no fear, for she may fade away. In your hands, the birth of a new day." The second line is, "Crimes that keep their secrets will unfold behind the clouds. There upon the rainbow is the answer to a never-ending story." Why is this so important to somebody like me? Well, when you decode what that actually means, it is giving you the answer to how you exit the game board of fear. So, who are the they that are controlling the game board? There's a couple of things you have to realize. One, when you step back far enough and you look at this game board, and it would be a black and white checkerboard, right? Because the black and the white represents both the light and the dark, which represents all of reality and the paradox, etc., of the polarity spectrum. When you get that high view, you can start to see things in patterns. Now, whether you refer to they as billionaires, elites, corporations, archons, Orion Group, reptiles, politicians, they're all kind of in the same structure, right? Which is certain people that have control over narratives, over masses, trapping those people into a fear consciousness that they feel like there's no way out. Now, if you look, the structure is always the same. There is an external villain. The villain is all powerful. Fear is constant. You are trapped by the villain. You need a savior to get away from the villain because you do not have the power within yourself to free yourself from the constructs of their reality. You feel small inside this hostile universe where escape is rare and everything feels like a box. The architecture is structured so that everything is in a square. If you look at architecture now, there's very limited architecture that is round or cylindrical, which would be a more universal flow. Everything's boxy, and perhaps that is by design on this particular game board because that box actually gives you the feeling of being trapped. The square shape with its walls that are very definitive are designed to box you in, whereas a circle allows you to keep flowing around. It's a very different geometry, and the energy, how it moves, is very different. Now, the most dangerous part of this fear cosmology is not if they exist. It is if they do, you are powerless to do anything to stop them. And this is the lie. A free consciousness doesn't ask who is controlling reality. A free consciousness asks, how do I write myself out of this narrative and create a new one that benefits my highest good and the highest good of everyone around me? That one narrative shift takes you from player to designer. And this is super important to remember. Every control-based narrative has the same weakness. It cannot survive attention without belief. It cannot survive awareness of form. And it cannot survive someone standing up within the myth and saying, I am no longer playing this game. Fear stories collapse when you stop feeding them emotionally. Because everything in the universe lives off energy. When you understand that the plants feed off the energy of the sun, right? We feed off each other's energy. We feed off the energy of animals and plants in the form of food. We feed off the energy of the air, of the ether. There are other beings in the universe that feed off of our energy, and that is how the ecosystem goes. That is a divine ecosystem, if you will. So when you know that you're feeding fear emotionally, the second thing you have to ask yourself is, how do I stop doing that? How do I stop participating in the act of feeding fear and then making it grow larger and larger? Not just for me, but for everything around us. Remember, our actions have ripple effects and we affect everyone around us, whether we believe it or not. So we do have to be conscious of how we feel and what we think and what we believe, because all of those things matter, not just to us, but to everyone, the entire human consciousness grid. We don't stop feeding things emotionally by arguing politics or positioning or researching more villains or diving deep into enemy lore. How we do it is we change the game that we're playing. Instead of asking who is manipulating humanity, we say, what narrative is making me feel powerless and less in control? Instead of saying, how do we defeat them? We say, how do I change my thoughts, beliefs, and emotions to reflect a powerful, sovereign being? There's a really old saying that says, reinvent the game, reinvent the rules. What does that actually mean? Because that has deeper meaning than just the surface. It asks you to stand up within the story and recode the game. So what does that actually mean? How am I going to recode the game? Well, we don't do that by creating a war or winning a war that was created for us. We do it with the pen, because the pen is indeed mightier than the sword. The pen is mightier than the sword was actually coined by Edward Bulwer Lytton in 1839. I, of course, being the cinephile that I am, attribute it to Marcus Brody in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when he is trapped in the tank by the Nazis and he's like, Henry, the pen is mightier than the sword. So I actually go back to that reference. But all joking aside, that is exactly what it is. The pen is mightier than the sword, meaning that you are the creator. So you don't have to participate in the war. You don't have to be violent. You don't have to sacrifice yourself on the altar of whatever rebellion that may be before you. You can use your pen as a master creator, and you can rewrite the code. You can rewrite the game. Because the problem with games as they exist now is if you don't write the rules, you don't really understand the rules, and the rules are constantly changing, which makes it even harder and which causes a lot of despair and a lot of frustration. Just when you feel like you're getting ahead or things are changing for the good, some sweeping storyline comes in and changes and alters the direction of humanity. And we've seen this so many times over. Just when it looks like we're heading in the right direction, we take a hard right or a hard left. Or some of us believe that we're heading in the right direction, and it's too late before we realize that once again, we have been bamboozled by those who want to profit off of our pain. When consciousness moves out of fear mythology and moves into creator mythology, something happens. One, the villains become less interesting. They almost become amusing. And I hear this a lot from people who are really kind of waking up, and they'll find a lot of the stuff going on, like being in the circus of the absurd. And, my gurus would always say, you must laugh, because laughter keeps you high vibing. If you drop into sadness and fear and anger and despair, you stay low vibrational. And the more you stay low at that lower vibrational fear energy, the easier you are to be controlled. But if you actually pop out into creator mode and you watch the circus of the absurd unfolding before you with a keen eye, with an eye that says, I don't know if I have to participate in this, but I can just watch. I can be an observer. And again, I stand in my sovereign being, and I don't fall for certain narratives, and I don't get caught up in divisive conflicts. I just remain in that observer mode, a mode that allows me to move through space and time and say, okay, what thought do I need to counter this fear thought? If I were sitting here rewriting a script and they've done this, and this, what is the counter to that? And I just need to hold that in my mind. is, okay, well, they're doing this. I know I'm safe. I know I'm okay. I know everything is going to work out in our favor. Humanity is elevated. Humanity is protected. Humanity has a beautiful destiny. There's a lot of different ways to go about reframing the fear narrative within yourself individually to keep yourself at that higher level of vibration so you don't fall into the fear trap. Games can only bind players. They cannot bind authors. The minute you know this, you step out of that playership and you go into authorship. And now you're a writer. So you don't really look at everything from this same vantage point. Now you can look at it from a way higher frequency. You're looking at it from the creator frequency. From this vantage point, which is the frequency that we call love, we can now write this story as a counter myth to the fear narrative. This would be a myth for sovereignty, a myth for creative command, a myth for stepping back into love, peace, prosperity, and a new era of harmony, a myth for the creator consciousness opening up within the simulation. The difference now is you're not a character on a game board in a game written by people that you don't know with rules that you were never told. Now you are the writer, director, producer of this story. The one who crafts the story from a different vantage point is the one who wins the war on consciousness. And that does not take a global consciousness, friends. One human being, you, yes, you, the person who's sitting in their car, having their coffee, sitting at their computer, feeling like I am not the Superman or Superwoman. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You have that power. Your imagination can create reality. And arguably, because humans have been fed and programmed so many negative, lower vibrational storylines, we have been unconsciously creating this reality. So many movies seem prophetic. And the question I would ask is, are they prophetic or were they programmed into us? And when you program enough people with that level of consciousness, that consciousness then creates itself and manifests in reality. And so you have all these people watching the same thing. It's no coincidence that a television, and we've heard this many times, this is not created by me. There's many people who have broken this down. A television is telling you a vision on a channel, right? Channeling that has a program. I remember my grandma Angie used to say, I gotta watch my program. I gotta watch my program. At that time, no one was thinking that a program was actually a program. We oh, that's a television show. Even that, a show of a vision, a possibility. So let's call it for what it is. The one who wins the war on consciousness gets to write the rules of the game. And herein lies the catch-22, or a paradox, if you will, because if that person or people or beings that is controlling consciousness is of a lower war, despair, anger, greed, control sort of mentality, that will be the program that gets pumped out into humanity. So what happens when we know that we've been programmed? When we finally kind of cut through the illusion and we see these things for what they actually are? Two things can happen. Sometimes people feel a great level of despair and they feel even more powerless. They say, oh my goodness, if this is true, what can I do? There's a lot you can do. The most powerful gift you have is actually individuality. And when you understand your individuality and you understand the power of your imagination, you will understand that you will have far more control than you think you do. And I want to read this because I wrote this out one night. So I'm going to read it to you exactly as I wrote it, so I don't tangent, because sometimes I tangent. Okay. Individuality is the true gift of a human being, and also why human power has always frightened those who seek control. Not because we humans are weak, but because we are not. Because the human being has a consciousness of their own nature that is dangerously creative. And that power has been buried beneath story, programmed with fear, and conditioned with limitation. And this is done all to keep a being with near godlike imagination believing itself powerless. You see, the strongest creator in the universe does not need to dominate other worlds. It needs to imagine them into being. And that is the gift that we humans were bestowed with. Now, if you want to control something that powerful, you don't attack it head on. You convince it to attack itself. You teach it to doubt its own worth. You train it to mistrust its own instincts. You flood it with fear-based stories until it mistakes anxiety for intuition and numbers for safety. You turn its imagination into a weapon against itself. Instead of envisioning possibility, it imagines catastrophe. Instead of dreaming of freedom, it rehearses failure. Instead of creating abundance, it anticipates loss. That is how power is neutralized, by narrative, by belief. And the moment we humans actually realize this, that's when the game changes. Because imagination isn't a battlefield. It's a creative canvas. And once you stop painting fear and you start painting love, everything changes. Not all at once, but from the inside out. Now, this is just like Bastian could create Fantasia with his wishes. You can do the same. A human allowed to create from the heart freely without fear and without permission can build worlds rooted in love, empathy, and compassion. And nothing is more powerful than that. What happens next? This is the main question. A lot of people are talking about war, economic collapse, the end of time, digital enslavement. There's so many narratives. But control myths always climax in destruction. Awakening myths climax in integration. We, the human being that I just told you is super, super powerful, that human being gets to choose which myth it's going to feed. Because if you remember from the top, we have the two choices. We feed fear or we feed love. When you feel love, you have no fear. When you are overcome with fear, you do not feel love. And I have gone over this in my story in many episodes on this podcast, where I've talked about my own battle with fear and having to overcome it with neuroplasticity and rewriting my story and rewiring my brain to remember that I am loved. So how do we do that though, right? Because God, love, life, it is one of those things that it can beat you down. And some of us really have had experiences that can make it hard to believe in a lot of things. And the trick to really creating this new storyline and this new narrative is to hold that vision of this beautiful new world in your imagination. Remember what I said about imagination. Imagination creates reality, but you've got to have focused intention. You have to keep that vision in your mind. You have to keep yourself at that higher vibrational energy. No matter what life throws at you, got to pull your bootstraps back up and pick yourself up. Find the love in the lesson. There is love in the lesson. Find it. Find the good. You've got to look for it. But the more you train yourself to look for the good, the easier it's going to be to hold that beautiful new life, that beautiful world that we want to leave for our children and grandchildren. You can hold that in your mind. You. That's right. Again, you. The most powerful creator on the earth. You don't have to look for anybody else to do this. You've actually got this. I want to read this last part that I wrote because I do think it's really important. As we've already discussed, if something is spoken long enough, imagined deeply enough, and emotionally fed enough, it begins to shape the world we experience because our behavior shapes reality. Fear does not need to be real to become powerful. It only needs to be believed. And as we know, there are people and systems that profit from fear, from division, from power to keep humanity small and stuck inside a narrow story. Not through magic in the traditional sense, but through narrative. That is why the first step to anchoring is by refusing the script. When you stop emotionally feeding fear, it starves. When you stop repeating it, it weakens. And when you stop identifying with it, it collapses. This is why imagination matters, because imagination creates identity, direction, and destiny. And when fear uses imagination, it builds prisons. But when love uses imagination, it builds refuge. So, How do we anchor in when we're constantly frightened of what might become of us? This is where we turn to our chosen deities: prayer, faith, sacred symbols, divine figures, angels, the Christ, light, ancestors, guides. They are not escapes from reality. They are anchors for coherence. They hold the nervous system steady. They lift consciousness above survival, and they remind the body what safety feels like. When a human being remembers safety inside, the control outside loses its grip. However you find this safety, you need to anchor it into your imagination. Pictures of angels surrounding you in light, Jesus holding you, Mother Mary praying for you, Brahma blessing you, Buddha sitting beside you, Muhammad. All of those entities anchor you to belief in a higher protection. This is probably the most important part of how to use your imagination to create the new world, because if you don't wrap yourself in this divine protection, it is very easy to lose that vision. This is because you are vibing at a level where they can actually penetrate. They can actually infiltrate and influence you positively. All paths lead to the same truth. And if we can stop fighting about whose religion or whose philosophy is right and whose is wrong, we'll realize that they're all speaking to the same destination: victory for humanity. It is the same medicine delivered in different languages to different hearts. And honestly, when you think about it, it's rather brilliant. One conscious being can change a lineage. Enough awakened people can change the world. This isn't denying darkness. It's about balancing light and shadow so both can exist in a way that heals instead of harms. When we integrate instead of suppress, something changes. Consciousness elevates, conflict softens, creation becomes cooperative instead of competitive. And a human who uses their individuality to cultivate awareness becomes multidimensional by nature. That kind of awareness lifts us out of the fear story and propels us into a new era. People always ask me if help exists beyond what we can see. And the simple answer is yes. But assistance meets us where we're aligned. You cannot receive what you're not tuned into. You cannot understand what you don't resonate with. And you can't access higher states of being when clinging to lower vibrational stories. Which is why the work is simple, but not always easy. And this is where the call cut method can be a tool to help you align. You're going to call cut on stories that steal your power. You're going to call cut on beliefs that keep you afraid. You're going to call cut on inner voices that aren't yours. And you're going to replace them with love, with curiosity, with courage, and with creativity. Because you are unimaginably powerful. And the more you continuously rewrite your inner world, the more beautiful your outer world will become. And remember this before you go. Humanity doesn't need to be rescued. We need to rewrite our story. Not by force, not by fear, and not by division, but by imagination reclaimed. Each of us holding a vision of a kinder world, each of us imagining love as law, and each of us writing a new chapter through the way we treat each other. That is how you change humanity. That is how you eradicate fear from the inside. One heart, one story, one pen. Yours. Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angelique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.